Now back live to the Kenny Report.
Let's bring in our panel here on set with me. We can do it in real life. It's a wonderful pleasure to welcome back Kel Richards and David Flint. Thanks both for joining us. I don't know whether you happened to catch that chat with Mark Latham, but...
Yes, I did hear that.
He speaks an amazing amount of common sense these days. He'd be a good Federal Labor Party leader now, wouldn't he?
Actually, Albanese should take him on as an advisor. Then Albanese would do much better than he's doing at the moment.
I always thought about this when he was opposition leader. I was working in the Howard government then, but he had moments of sheer brilliance, David, where he really cut through on issues. But then obviously he had his lapses, and we've seen a bit of that since. But he's been on a roll of late, I think, speaking just good common sense on so many issues. And Keller's right. Albo could do worse than to listen to him.
I think his lapses came from the caucus rule when he realised that he couldn't go into that area because of party rules. He obviously had great difficulties.
He's got a brain that
very
really
bright.
works, and he thinks things through. That's what's impressive.
Yeah, he's dismissed, of course, by the sort of green left political media class as somehow he's become a loony right-winger, whereas his arguments about aspiration and the advancement of working families are really quite consistent with what he said as Federal Labor leader back in 2004, 5, 7.
Absolutely. And
sorry, go back before then. 2004 was the election, so it was 2003 and 4, really.
That's right,
he was making those arguments.
And what the Labor Party still hasn't worked out is when you attack people who are well-paid, you're attacking two groups of people, the well-paid and the lowly paid who aspire to be well-paid. You're attacking both of them when you attack the well-paid people, and somehow or other that penny has not dropped for the Labor Party.
Yeah, this is the problem for this parliamentary week for Labor. Now, I'm assuming both of you will say that the full tax reduction package should go through, but what is holding Anthony Albanese and Labor back from doing that?
He hasn't been able to reform. He needs to cleanse himself of the problems that he had with the campaign. The campaign was essentially that they would become a government of thieves. They were seen as thieves, particularly by the self-funded retirees. But he's forgetting that a vast number of people who would normally vote Labor are actually doing quite well. They're on shift work, they're tradesmen, they're that sort of people, and they're aspiring. They're investing in investment properties. When they're elderly, they're looking at frank dividends, and they're the ones that they were targeting. They thought they were just targeting Liberal voters, but they were also targeting a lot of Labor voters, including, as you say, aspirational people.
And they've got a way out of this. All they need to do in their speeches is to say, we don't want to hold up anyone's tax cuts, so what we'll do is we'll pass the lot and we will repeal the top-end tax cuts when we're elected after the next election.
We'll reserve the right to. They take another tax plan to the election, and that's the sensible way to go. I think, Kel, the problem here is Albo and others, I think they're fighting the Tories, as they call them. They like to fight the government. But in this particular case, so soon after the election, when tax was central, they're actually fighting the voters. Now, we know Labor won seats and, you know, it's not winner takes all. But the great takeout from the election is that the electorate en masse voted for the tax cuts. You don't want to thumb your nose at that. You want to respect that.
You've got to picture the scene where Labor is dividing to the side of the Speaker's chair that is saying, nay, we will not allow tax cuts. I mean, that's such a bad look. And I actually think the tax cuts will get through. I was talking to Senator Rex Patrick from the Centre Alliance about this. Now, from what he's telling me, they're talking to the government. They would like some things like control of electricity prices as a bit of a trade-off, which is something the government would want to do anyway. Now, if what Rex Patrick has been telling me is right, the Centre Alliance will give 2 votes, Jackie Lambie will come with them, that's 3 votes. It will get through anyway. So Albanese will just look like a loser all the way round.
There's this argument they're running, though, David, to try and play themselves in, that we would allow the second tranche to be brought forward because the economy needs this tax cut boost now, right? Now, follow the logic on this, right? They're saying we won't support the third tranche, though, because it's too far out and we don't know whether the economy will be able to support it. So while we're in deficit, they're saying we can bring forward tax cuts because the economy needs it. Yet they're saying we can't lock in the later ones because we might not be able to afford it. I mean, it's a completely contradictory message.
And I think the electorate is sick and tired of this.
Yes.
The election is over. They now expect the government and the parliament to get on with their work and Labor to let these through. I think everybody everybody who's rational should be in favour of lower taxation at all levels. And we know that the rich pay much more of the tax than the poor do. Those are legitimately paying their tax.
The economy. Yes.
And this idea of a class war doesn't appeal to the average Australian, and they are sick and tired of disputes and the election. It's all over. Labor should now allow the government to get on with governing.
Now, we do have a new Governor-General, General David Hurley, sworn in today. He's well known to people in New South Wales because he's been the governor, was the governor here for a number of years. He was pretty well known publicly before that as Chief of Army, I think was his highest posting in the Defence Forces. I've not had much to do with him, but I know of his record, Kel. It's impeccable, and he did a good job as governor. So he represents a very, very safe choice for Scott Morrison, doesn't he?
That's the word. I play croquet, which is a lovely, elegant old game. And there is a tactical shot you can play in croquet, which is called a safety. That's what this is. It's that shot. Ex-military men, for some reason, do brilliantly as state governors and governors-general. There was a former state governor of New South Wales, Sir David Martin, if you remember. He was in the Navy before he became state governor, and when he was in the Navy, I was involved in doing his media training. And I've never had anyone pick up media training faster than he did or handle it better when he was in the job. These are the people who can do that job with dignity and intelligence and just make the government look good because of how well they do the job. It's a safety.
They should all be safeties, all right? When you're choosing a Governor-General, safety should be like your #1 prerequisite. You're not there to sort of shake the system up, make a statement, go for symbolism. You want someone safe who's not going to get involved in any scandal at all, but most importantly, any constitutional scandal.
Yes, Sir Peter Cosgrave demonstrated that very well. For example, he realised when he needed advice. He understood when he would make the decision. He showed that, for example, over the double dissolution. He insisted, quite properly, that there be emergency supply granted until after the election. And the advice came to him. The bill went through. Labor could have blocked it, but they chose not to because they wanted the election. He behaved impeccably. And General Hurley has behaved impeccably in New South Wales. He is an excellent choice. He will perform very well. Military and naval men seem to have this advantage.
It is interesting the time that he comes in, right, because we're having this debate about the role of the Governor-General and the way Sir Peter Cosgrave potentially could have been roped in to the Liberal leadership drama last August. We don't know yet whether Malcolm Turnbull actually raised with Peter Cosgrave the eligibility for Parliament of Peter Dutton, but certainly there are intimations that he may well have done that. He certainly raised with his colleagues the problem of whether or not Peter Dutton could be sworn in. Now, of course, it didn't matter in the end because Scott Morrison won the Liberal leadership ballot, maybe partly because of this doubt Malcolm Turnbull created within the Liberal Party. Are you concerned that Malcolm Turnbull, the one-time leader of the Australian Republican movement, might have sought to involve the Governor-General in such a matter?
I am concerned, and he should not have, because there's a very clear separation of powers. The Governor-General's role, exercising the reserve power and appointing the Prime Minister, is to be satisfied, as far as he can be, that the proposed Prime Minister has the confidence of the House. That's his only criterion. Questions of eligibility under the Constitution are matters for the House, and under legislation the House may refer this, they don't have to, they may refer this to a statutory court, that is the Court of Disputed Returns. Not the High Court as such, but the High Court sitting as the Court of Disputed Returns. They don't have to go to them.
We've seen that play out fairly regularly over the past couple of years, right? So we know the process. Yes. You know, if the Parliament thinks that there's a doubt about eligibility. Obviously, a lot of MPs referred themselves off to the High Court, but we knew that the Parliament could actually vote to do that. So, I mean, you're right, the legal sense here seems pretty clear, that if the Governor-General knew that this was the person elected and supported by the coalition, therefore could carry the numbers in the House, then he would have been obliged to swear him in.
And how fortunate we are that the people of Australia, both constitutional monarchists and real Republicans, decided that they did not want the model that was put up in 1999, because under that model, the President would not have had the same reserve powers. The President could be dismissed without notice, without any grounds whatsoever, and without any right of appeal by the Prime Minister. So the President would have a gun at his head. He'd be on a guillotine as well.
But isn't that practically what we have now? I mean, the Governor-General could be sacked at any moment by the Prime Minister?
The Prime Minister must make a case to the Queen. It has to be put in writing. And this is...
And it can't be quick. It can't be done.
It can't be quick. And the Queen may raise questions. She may see other ways of solving it. In the 1930s, the King took about 4 or 5 months to remove a Governor-General from one of the dominions where the Prime Minister wanted this.
Doesn't that underscore the problem then with the current system? Why would we have the Queen ruling on such a matter?
It does to an extent, but it provides a buffer. It provides a buffer to say that people want to behave in an extent.
We can understand the benefits of that buffer, but from the Republican point of view, and I'm a Republican, why would that buffer be exercised by the sovereign monarch of another nation?
No, she's the Queen of Australia when she exercises that.
Yeah.
But
it had to be before you.
Who's she barracking for in the Ashes, you reckon?
Well, she doesn't reveal that. Who's she barracking for at Ascot? That's the important question.
The problem is what you replace the current system with. Now, you've said before to me that you're a Republican, and I remember walking away from the radio studio after we'd had a chat, and I thought, what's the solution? The solution would be just to have no replacement, to have no Governor-General, no state governors. But you can't pull that off because you need 6 states, as well as the federal government, to agree to do that. It's not going to happen.
No, but the Governor and the Governor-General are important checks and balances in the Westminster system. The job of the Republicans is to produce a model which is significantly better than the one we have. Now,
or not worse.
Yes,
that maintains everything and codifies it all beautifully. That is...
the two republics, the two old republics, which have worked very well for significant periods of time, are the Swiss and the American. The American has the weakness that they've turned the High Court, the Supreme Court, into effectively a legislature which changes the Constitution as it wishes. That's the problem.
They have a president that has all that executive power that we don't want.
But he's elected king, in effect, the American president.
But the checks and balances, apart from the Supreme Court mismanaging its role, the checks and balances in the American Constitution work. The checks and balances in the Swiss Constitution work. What you don't get, what won't work, is to try and graft onto our existing constitutional monarchy a republic of the style of 1999. That will not work.
It won't work. It didn't work then. We'll come up with that. Well, we're not going to solve it right here, right now, although we'd give it a red-hot go. We better take a break. When we come back, let's talk about Israel Folau and John Setka. Not that they're linked at all. With the panel today, and I'm joined by David Flint and Kel Richards. Let's just quickly get on to the Israel Folau issue. Kel, he's digging in. He's going to fight. He thinks this is an important principle. No sign of Rugby Australia backing down. I think one of the interesting things here is something that Mark Latham referred to, and that is the way corporate sponsors can dictate what's going on. Now, this happens in all sorts of areas now. Even the Australian Stock Exchange corporate code now sort of is demanding companies focus not just on making a profit, delivering value for their shareholders, but doing all sorts of things in the social realm.
Engineering, yes. Yeah. Look, it's great. And the problem for Rugby Australia is this is a lose-lose-lose situation. There is no win here for them anywhere. They either lose the court case or they lose their major sponsor, and they've already lost their best player. Now, the chairman of Rugby Australia is Cameron Klein, I think. Yep. And one of the comments that he made, and I think this is really interesting, he said, well, no one's told us what else we could have done. But what else they could have done is really simple. They could have put out a press release saying Israel Folau is expressing his personal opinion. He doesn't speak for Rugby Australia. And as it happens, we don't share his opinion. End of problem.
Exactly.
But instead of which, they've opened up this can of worms, which is going to go on for months. They will almost, because of Klein again saying we were influenced by fearing the loss of a sponsor, they're now opening up so many legal channels to challenge what they've done.
Why didn't they just ring Kel? I mean, that's the perfect. That's the way adult civilisations operate, right? I mean, he's a sporting player. He's entitled to his own views.
Exactly.
As long as he's not out there preaching hate and vilification against the group, then life goes on.
It seems we need 2 laws. One to restrain companies using their market power to restrain others, not in their employment, in the exercise of their freedom of speech and religion. Why should a corporation, for example, an airline, control what is said by somebody else? And the second thing is, I don't think corporations should be allowed to adopt political positions unless it's been approved within the last 2 years by a resolution of the General Meeting with a 75% support.
Yeah.
Why
Chris,
not?
Can I remind you of something Peter Beattie said to you when you were in Brisbane and talking to him about this? He complained about the fact, you said, would Rugby League accept
You know,
Israel
they said
Folau?
they're too inclusive to accept it.
And he said, but he hasn't withdrawn and apologised for his post. And I sat there thinking, he doesn't understand the difference between work life and outside work life. And this is the point David is making. There's got to be an outside work life where you are not under the control of the feudal lord who runs the corporation that you work for.
There was the Wallaby, Pocock, wasn't it, who was arrested at a protest against coal mining or whatever. But he wasn't barred.
No.
He was celebrated and lauded for breaking the law.
Exactly, yes. And Israel stated classical Christian doctrine in a church in the cloud. If you wanted to be offended, you had to go in, you had to find his Instagram site, go in there, like going into a church, and be offended, or be on the receiving end of his post.
Can I give you 30 seconds of theology, Chris? Christianity could be summed up in one word, which is forgiveness. His post has been misunderstood. It's been called an attack. It hasn't been. He's been saying, look, there are a number of behaviours that offend God. What you're offered is forgiveness. That's not offensive. And to say that he was saying anything else in his post is to misread what he was saying.
He wants people to repent and join him in eternal
Be
life
forgiven,
and all that.
you know? And all of us, let's face it, I'll speak for you two as well as myself.
Not me.
We all need forgiveness.
Not me. I'm not going to hell. Although I did feature in his list there, I think. But just briefly, I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, David, with your legal background. John Setka. Is he definitely going to be kicked out of the Labor Party, or could there be some legal manoeuvrings here?
He should not be. The political parties they've captured a brilliant position. They get all of these exclusions from the laws, privacy laws and electoral laws and so on. They get a cornucopia of financial advantage. In return for that, they should be required to be open, transparent and democratic, and there has to be a proper process. They misuse expulsions. These are used by parties to control pre-selections. They're very exclusive about who they get in, and they throw out people they don't like because they want to control the pre-selections. The Americans get around that by having primaries, which is a much better way of pre-selecting people, as we've seen, because it's produced the most extraordinary president that we've seen since Reagan.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing here is that Anthony Albanese, when he first announced that he was going to expel John Setka, moved to have him expelled, he said it was to do with these alleged comments at a union meeting. He said it was divorced from any of the court cases that were then going on. And it's
the Rosie Batty comments, supposedly.
The alleged Rosie Batty comments. So I think this is a real problem because he's narrowed it down to that particular case, and there are conflicting versions of what went on there, and Setka might be able to stymie this, you would think.
What does he do? Does he switch to the Sally McManus line? Which no, it's not about that. It's about the harassment case. The really weird thing is they could have solved this if in the last Parliament they had passed the Ensuring Integrity Bill. That said that for registered bodies such as unions, the office holders have to be fit and proper persons. They could have actually sat back and let the government, the law, deal with Setka. Now, they have to pass the Ensuring Integrity Bill, I would think, this time, because the government intends to re-present it to the Parliament. That solves the problem, instead of playing the sort of funny games with membership that David is worried about.
Well, and the real issue here is the CFMMEU, and particularly the Victorian branch or the construction branch. Labor leaders from the late, great Bob Hawke down have been saying for a long while that it ought to be disaffiliated from the ALP. That would solve the problem.
Yes, that's another question. But to try and make it a rule that who Mr Albanese doesn't want in the party must thereby be expelled goes against principle, particularly as this is not just an ordinary party, it's a party which has captured important exceptions from the law and financial advantages by being a registered political party.
We will have to leave it there. We're right out of time. Thanks so much, David Flint and Kel Richards.
Pleasure.
Really appreciate your input. We're going to take a break.